Good day and welcome to my YouTube channel. This is Joan Hayes. In today's tutorial, I'm going to talk about how a painting frustrated me and how I thought it was going to be a fail, but it turned out in the end not to be because I persevered. It might sound corny, but honestly, the painting just kept frustrating me. I kept putting it down, walking away, coming back. Of course, you can't see that in this tutorial because it's, you know, sped up. But I honestly wasn't sure about the composition. I felt I was getting frustrated and I was rushing things. And then what I found as I went along is when I took the time to step away and to evaluate what I'm doing, it started to come together, and I took the time to layer and modify it as I went along. I do what I always do, and I wet the paper back and front, and then I started out with my base. Um, with it was a ultramarine in the background in the sky and in my waterway, and I went in with some burnt sienna and just did my basic format, my layout of the composition. And I think this is where I started to get frustrated, is that I thought it was maybe a little too zigzaggy, too separated by the Payne's gray that I put in there with that ultramarine in the waterway. And I kept overworking while the paint was wet, and that was really annoying me as well. So I really had to just take a deep breath and, you know, let the paint dry for a few minutes. Here I am trying to do the tutorial, and I'm telling you where I get frustrated, but this is life, right? And, as I slowly went through the piece and started to layer gently and not overthink what I was doing, it started to come together. I enter the piece with some straight Payne's gray to get some shadowing, um, brought in that straight burnt sienna, with a tiny touch of alizarin crimson and some of the magenta, and it just started to mesh a little better. Trying to practice what I preach on letting things dry, not all the way, but just a little bit, so that I have a little more control and don't get myself all worked up over why everything is running together. Um, it's Even after all these years of painting, I find myself, patience isn't always my highest quality when I start painting. Um, I want to see things move along a little faster, and you just can't, especially with watercolor. You can't step away for too long. You can't rush things. So here I go with this piece with the burnt sienna and some Payne's gray, as you can probably see my mixing there. And just going through the whole piece. The composition's coming together a little better for me. It's like a fall marshy scene with a little beach in the background. And I'm trying to work on the shadows here within the grasses, and emphasize where the grasses meet the water, and the reflection and so on. So here I go, trying to continue on with that, the grasses in the foreground, working with a little bit of that Jaune cream on cream I use, with the burnt sienna, and just starting to work my strokes a little bit vertical. I'm not crazy about that center line I have going from left to right, how rigid it is, so I'm starting to think about how do I change that, because it doesn't look natural to me. Bringing in a little more of that Jaune cream to bring some highlights into the piece. And as you see, I'm just layering. I work light to dark. I jumped ahead a little bit with the Payne's Gray for the shadow, but that was because I was just laying out my format. And it might look like I'm basically covering up, but I'm not. The underbody will come through once the piece dries a little bit, so bear with me on that. And you'll see as the painting progresses, I'm gently just using subtle touches of strokes to help me emphasize the grasses and the highlights in the water. So what started out as a frustrating piece is becoming more interesting to me. So here we go with the shadows in the water. I'm using the wet of the paper to let this kind of organically move around in that shadow, and I'm liking that kind of rough edge that it gave. So I brought in some cream on cream from Holbein for the highlight in the water. And now I'm coming in with that burnt sienna and some yellow ochre and a little bit of that jaune cream combined, which is a nice color, and going at different levels with it. My strokes now are much more vertical. I'll occasionally do a horizontal stroke on the grasses, but it's mostly going to be vertical to emphasize the grass and the direction it's going. Trying not to do it straight up all along, going left to right and sideways a little bit on the grasses. I do come in with a little bit of magenta and the burnt sienna combined, and that's a nice addition. I'm trying to do several different tones in that the shadows on the grasses above the Payne's Gray to show the layering a little bit, and you'll see how with the Payne's Gray, I'm not doing a straight line across. I'm trying to give some irregular shapes there. And in the foreground, when I come in with the Payne's Gray strokes in the foreground grasses, it looks bizarre, just the strokes there, but I'm actually going to, as you see, feather them out. And this will be an underbody for what I do a little bit later. And like I've said before in my paintings, all these layers I put in do eventually show through, most of them anyway, I should say, and I try to utilize all the colors I lay down. That magenta mixed with the burnt sienna is really a nice combination for this piece. And just a little touch here and there, that's all it takes. And then I'm going to try to show now, as I move along towards the end of this piece, how to use my fan brush to, I use it, flat, and I use it on its side to do the grasses. And again, this is impression. I work mostly impression. I should say always impression. So I'm not doing a realistic piece here. I'm doing my interpretation of this piece. So I'm fanning, realizing, you see that center line that was bugging me. I'm trying to soften the edges a little bit because, there really isn't a straight line in grasses. So I've got to give that look of a little jagged edge. And here I'm going back in with the gray on gray just to give some highlight. And it won't be that extreme, though that looks pretty decent right there. It'll lighten, as I've always say with watercolor, it will lighten slightly. And I'm bringing down that grass. Again, just the subtle touches are making the difference now on the final run on this piece. And going right on top with that jaune cream, and just subtle strokes going right to left, a little bit of fanning, and in the background trying to do the same thing. Here I'm going in with, again, with the Payne's gray. As I tell you, it always changes, and as it dried a little lighter than I thought. I'm coming in with that magenta and mixing it in with the Payne's gray that I laid down, but it dried lighter than I thought, so I had to go back in and bring out the intensity that I wanted with that at that time with this piece. So now I'm just doing the final strokes. I'm coming in with a straight cad orange just to show the highlights of the sun coming down on the grasses. And that I'll feather out a little bit, and you can see I'm trying to feather this so it doesn't look so rigid. Can't seem to keep my paper straight. Again, cad orange, just in a couple spots. Don't need to fill the page with it, just, you know, a couple accent touches, and that will be feathered as I go. And you'll see in the finished product that, you know, it all comes together, or at least I hope you think it does. Just bringing in the grasses again, trying to emphasize the direction of the grasses and the way the wind is moving it ever so slightly. You know, and to be able to accept the fact that some pieces don't always work, but don't give up too soon. What have you got to lose but a little piece of paper? And you know, nothing ventured, nothing gained, as they say. And you know, watercolor is a difficult medium and sometimes can be quite frustrating. But you know, carry on with the piece, and if nothing else, change it slightly, turn it into something else, or work through it. It's a fun challenge, and you know, each piece I do, and I've been doing this for many, many years, each piece I do gives me a new challenge, and that's the beauty in it. And as I get older, and I'm in my mid-60s, I love the challenge, and I think I need the challenge, and I think everyone does, no matter what their age. But you know, it turned out to be a piece I liked. I started out frustrated with myself more than anything, and it worked out to be just fine. And again, it's just a painting. It's not going to make or break my life or the day. So I enjoyed doing it in the end, and I'm glad I finished it. And at the end here, I come in with a pencil, and it really is kind of just moving the paint around and giving me more of the leaf, the grass effect. So I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope it encourages you to pick up a pen, pick up some paints. I don't mean pen. I pick up some paints and pick up some paper and paint. I'll hope to see you in the next painting. Thanks for following along. You have a great day.